Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner, regular shirt, to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and a nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens, strength coach, run Strength Guild, amongst other things. So come to the new forum, theironforum.com. Be a part of us.
This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, Associate Professor of the Carrick Institute, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, and back in Sub-Zero, Minnesota from Costa Rica. So only about a 95-degree temperature difference.
Oh, my God.
It got cold here all of a sudden today. We're like going to be in the teens for the next week.
Burr.
Yeah, so it's like
Tis
supposed to be 7 degrees today.
That's cold for you guys, though.
Yeah, that's fucking,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody, we have some, the usual roundup of mail and news. And then after the break, we're just going to talk about the call of muscle sports, why, people do it. Is it for community? Is it their natural talent? Is it, you just go to a powerlifting meet and you're instantly inspired? You're like, that's it. So we'll talk about that because I do feel like it's probably a little bit different than the way people get into collegiate sports or higher, to be honest. And yet it can be at that level or even higher, of course. So let's start with some questions. I'm going to pose one to Mike, and I know, Phil, you got some from the forums, of course.
Yep.
Mike, the question for you came from a gentleman who said, I'm just bombarded with ads for all these quote-unquote new plant proteins and how superior they are to meat and get rid of your meat and look, I'm a vegetarian, how buff I am. And, we've touched on this sort of thing on the show before probably, but what would you say to him? Because he said, these people are really convincing, and I want an educated opinion, that plant proteins really are superior and I need to make a wholesale switch.
I always ask them, well, send me your data. Then they usually get really quiet pretty fast. But, I haven't seen any data so far that plant proteins are superior to some meat proteins or especially like a whey protein. If you get a high enough dose or you start doing some fancy combining of different types of plant proteins to try to optimize the amino acid profile and leucine content, you can get some that I think are equivalent. There's been a few studies showing that like a rice protein, if you take about 40-gram dose of a supplement compared to a 20-gram dose of whey protein, you get, about the same response. Mm-hmm. The downside of plant proteins is if you're using just one in isolation and are using a smaller amount, and assuming they haven't added other extra amino acids to it,
good point.
Usually your response is going to be a little bit less. And this is based on, acute studies of what's called muscle protein synthesis or muscle protein synthetic response. I don't know what all the fuss is about. I mean, actually, if someone is a vegetarian or a vegan athlete, it never really has been easier to do that. So if I work with a vegan athlete, my first question is, are you okay using some type of protein supplement, even if it's a vegan-based supplement? And if they're like, yeah, I'm like, oh, cool. This is relatively easy then. But if they're like, no, trying to get a lot of protein with only vegan sources, you can do it. It's just a lot of work, a lot of chewing, a lot of fiber, a lot of time. Yeah, so I don't quite understand. I mean, if you're going maybe the environmental route, maybe, but even then, that's definitely not my expertise, and there's good arguments on both sides of the fence on that too. So, yeah, I don't understand why the fuss is all that they're superior, because I haven't seen any data that supports that, but high enough dose, they may be equivalent.
In fact, we've seen data to the contrary, right? That the protein quality of most, like you said, unless you try to get very clever.
Yes.
I believe this guy is getting bombarded because the IFT,
I don't believe that.
Right? We've both been to the Institute of Food Technology meetings, and I mean, think about like the huge surge in Impossible burgers, and now all meats are becoming Impossible version. But that doesn't mean the quality is there. I think the average person, one of the first things that I try to explain is there's complete and incomplete proteins, but even among the complete proteins that have all 9 or 10 indispensable aminos, there's quality differences even among those, among the complete ones. And like you said, you're not going to be able to beat whey, I think whole egg is great. I just saw a new paper about whole egg being superior to egg white, and not surprised, but we've known that for years because of the protein quality scales, okay, so that was one nutrition side. Phil, what's the forums cooking up?
We've got a couple here. So this one is from Anna. I know this has been covered on the forum, but it would be interesting to have a very quick discussion on adaptogens. I imagine there are a lot of listeners out there that would benefit, but aren't on the forum. What are your guys' thoughts on adaptogens? Do you want me to go back to the original question on the forum?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I did see that one. What do you think, Miguel?
I mean, there's some data on some adaptogens, rhodiola, ashwagandha. If you look at the data on them, it's definitely still in the single digits. A lot of times it's not purely performance outcome based. And with that, again, like all things, you want to make sure the quality is good. Herbal products in general tend to, I don't want to say you get what you pay for, but even some of the more expensive ones, it may not be super high quality. So make sure you check on that. Yeah, it's one of those interesting categories that's been around for a while. Even the term adaptogen is a little bit harder to wrap your head around from a more Western perspective. But a couple of those I think can be useful. I mean, I would probably even put mushroom extracts as kind of sort of an adaptogen. Well, that's maybe not necessarily true. I think on the forum they're talking about like cordyceps increase performance. The original cordyceps was actually a fungus off the back of a caterpillar, which you're not really getting that anywhere just because the price is ungodly expensive. But you can get a similar version, which is actually Cordyceps militaris, which is a mushroom. There's some okay-ish data on that in performance, I would say. It's a little bit controversial. My favorite in terms of mushroom extracts is there's some data on lion's mane. I'm still trying to track down exactly what dose that translates to after it's been concentrated and actually in humans. And that's mostly for more brain development, increasing potentially BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is kind of like brain fertilizer to help with growing possibly new nerve pathways. And then for traveling and people under like a heavy load, or if you're doing a run of really pushing volume, or athletes that are changing time zones, I do like reishi extract. It's very, very bitter, so getting in a capsule is probably a good idea. There's some pretty good data on that in terms of immune system and function. Caveat with that, there's a study published in Nature showing that a lot of the mushroom extracts that they tested were basically crap. So you want to make sure to do your homework on that, ask them for actual data. Last part, too, is that if you look at mushroom extracts, the fruiting body, kind of the top portion of the mushroom, it has more beneficial data on it compared to the mycelial or the bottom root structure. A lot of, unfortunately, mushrooms grown in the U.S. that have all the nice labels of organic and made in the U.S., yeah, they're probably a mycelial portion that they actually sprout on grain. and then they just grind all of it up and put it in a supplement. So again, you want to make sure that you know what you're actually buying. You can always call the manufacturer, ask them for details on that too. So as an adjunct, I think it's helpful, but again, you're still talking about single digit percentages. And if the rest of your life is a, trash bin fire, adding adaptogens are not going to save you.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that quote from, was it Rogue One, the movie? I find your argument vague and unconvincing, the robot says.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of not mushrooms, and I'm actually very interested. Listeners know we're all interested in that. There's some very cool sort of micronutrition stuff.
Oh, definitely.
But
beta-glucan
yeah,
and everything else.
Yeah, the lion's mane and like nootropic kinds of things. Very cool, I think. But as far as the general definition, I just find it vague. Like, this is going to help you just adapt to all stressors. I first started reading about this stuff probably 20 years ago in like Eastern Bloc journals, Russian journals. And,
oh, yeah.
And I want more specific. I mean, I feel like science is reductionist for a reason. And if you're just kind of saying this just kind of helps you overcome any stressor and, like you said, I just don't think there's a lot. There's enough out there for me to spend my hard-earned dollars on ginseng as a supplement. That I know people feel very strongly about it, and you know what? If it's actually changing your outcomes in some way, good on you. But yeah, I think there's a lot other categories of stuff I'd probably be focusing on.
Yeah. And as an end of one, I've tested a bunch of them. I've had clients test a bunch of them and looking at their heart rate variability, to see if there's any impact on it. And it's pretty hit or miss. Like some people, for whatever reason, again, could be placebo, seem to respond a little bit better, and that their HRV is a little bit more stable, especially if we do higher training volumes and things of that nature. Other people, didn't really notice any difference either. I've actually tried to track down some of the Russian literature and some of the people who worked with a lot of those athletes and what they use, and even the people that I kind of trust in that area, which is like literally 3 people. They'll tell you that, it's a small effect. It's only used at specific times during training blocks. But they're also working with high-level elite athletes. And for them, 1% difference is freaking massive. And they're controlling a lot of other variables too. But even then, what they told me is that they don't use them, year-round all the time either. They still use them for very specific uses too. So
yeah.
Next part of the question: what is the best way to estimate your sodium needs?
Oh, good Lord.
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
Well, you know what? Let me start with this, because I've had students ask me this. You don't look at blood levels. This stuff is tight, right? Tightly regulated, and I think we get used to looking at vitamin D and other things. Oh, we'll look at 25-hydroxy-D and look at our vitamin D status, or glucose, or almost whatever else, right? The levels in your blood reflect intake. Sodium, not so. So you don't start there. Like, don't look at your blood work and be like, oh, my sodium is high or low. Well, then you've got hormonal and other problems, right? It's not the way you really look at sodium adequacy. What do you think, Mike?
I mean, what I do with athletes and people is I look at their nutrition log and chronometer. I like chronometer. I don't like MyFitnessPal, and see where they're at. I mean, in general, if you're eating, whole foods and not living out of stuff out of a can, like you're in a bomb shelter somewhere, then you're probably not getting a lot of sodium. I always ask them, how much salt do you add to your food? Do you salt to taste? Do you add a little bit more? What type of sodium do you use? And from there we can get an approximate amount. What I find is most athletes eating, real food, not a lot of processed food, they tend to be low. So I'll actually tell them, okay, salt your food till taste. We'll kind of watch your performance, see how that goes, increase your fluid intake. And even behind after that, assuming they're not exercising in a super hot environment or something like that, I just have them add more. Like I use the Element packets that have about 1,000 milligrams of sodium. You've had those guys on the program here before. And in general, at some point, their performance goes up and they feel better. I just had an athlete that reported big gains with that a couple of weeks ago. So if they're healthy, they don't have any high blood pressure, they don't have any other risk factors, I'm not worried about going too high with it as long as they have enough fluid intake. I find most of those athletes probably don't consume enough sodium and fluid. However, if you're talking about general population, it's almost the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
Like, you're eating so much processed food, you're not really exercising, you're not sweating, you're not losing it. You probably just need to drink a lot more water and not worry about it as much. If anything, switch some of your processed foods for more real foods.
Right. I mean, salt to taste is a interesting way to look at it. I would only ever look at sodium intake if somebody, maybe they're on a very specific, like you said, just completely unprocessed, super heavy fruit and veg diet, or if they've got certain symptoms of hyponatremia or something. I mean, the feds want you to actually suggest that you should only have about 2,300. It depends on the guidelines you look at, milligrams a day. The average American's going to eat, oh my God, at least double that probably. But again, that's Gen Pop versus our people who are sweating or on ketogenic diets or that kind of stuff. The old literature that I've read suggests that the actual need for sodium may be as low as 500 milligrams a day. But again, that you're talking about just not people training their ass off in a hot, sweaty gym for 3 hours,
Yeah, and then we get back to the old thing of need versus optimal.
Right.
You're right, yeah.
So, more than enough to survive. I want enough to kick ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
and I look at the risk versus reward. If, someone doesn't have high blood pressure, they're healthy, they're eating real food, they're sweating, I'm not too worried about them probably taking in too much, but I've seen people underperform by not taking in enough. Yeah. Especially if you add in, they're doing maybe 1 or 2 low carb days per week, or a ketogenic diet, or fasting, things like that, where all of a sudden, especially on a day of fasting, you're just probably not taking in any sodium. And if you're exercising, you're going to be losing glycogen, you're going to be losing fluid. I find even just adding more on those days is beneficial. And that's probably only getting you back to just where you were before anyway. It's not like you're going super high.
Mm-hmm. My only concern here is I think a fair number of large mammals are hypertensive. They are mildly hypertensive. Mm-hmm. I am actually, my blood pressure is almost in that mild hypertensive range. And my brother has very high blood pressure. He's on meds for it and everything. And I do seem to be sodium sensitive, right? About a third to a half of the public is genetically sodium sensitive. Not everybody is sodium sensitive, which is an interesting point. It's one of those nutrigenetic things, right? But I would say be careful. I think sometimes we're too, we like the counterculture. Oh, go eat sodium, you're a hard ass. And, well, on some level that's actually true because you're sweating in a hot environment and all that kind of stuff. And if your diet is very, very strict and you're not getting much sodium, but always keep in mind, I'm likely at least to be sodium sensitive as far as blood pressure goes, and I don't think, unless you're in, like what Phil will often say, that category of I don't give a shit if I'm hypertensive or not. It makes me feel better in the gym, and I've got a meat to crush. Well, that's your choice then, right? But high blood pressure, I got to tell you, it's an insidious thing because you don't necessarily feel it. And when I worked on the transplant floor at the Cleveland Clinic years ago, just as an intern, so many people were there, congestive heart failure, or they needed a kidney because high blood pressure it takes a toll. It does take a toll. So you just have to balance this stuff out, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. I got this from my buddy Luke Lehman at Muscle Nerds of, everyone should, at least on occasion, buy an Omron device to measure blood pressure for like $70 off of Amazon. You don't even have to know how to do it anymore. You stick the thing on and take a few readings. It's not that hard to do. And knowing resting heart rate and other cardiac markers is, I would agree with that 100%.
Yep. Maybe one more, Phil?
Part. Yep. This is on the lighter note. What are the 5 hardest exercises? Exercises being open, or hardest being open to interpretation?
Oof.
I'll start. Yeah. Good mornings with the safety squat bar.
Oh, those suck.
Freaking horrible. Just the safety squat bar sucks, but then doing good mornings with them is even worse. The ab wheel. That evil device just has a way of making you sore as shit no matter what.
Evil.
I'm not saying these are bad. Like, my interpretation is literally just that they're hard, but that could be good. So
because that's like one of my favorites, the ab wheel. But I always have to still test it out. Like once a year, I'll just grab the ab wheel and make sure I can still do one on my toes. Everybody at the gym's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, he can still do it." It's like, okay, I don't have to do it anymore. I'm done.
Still got it.
Still got it. So
Yeah.
5's hard. I don't know. You guys got any?
I think for me, high rep squats are brutal. I mean,
Yeah, they
like
are.
20 rep squats. When I say high rep, I mean like 20, because your low back starts to go, you know. I mean, at least mine always did. Maybe some people, if they're doing a lot of good mornings and stuff, they're more immune to that. But high rep squats, I think, they really kind of suck. I mean, all you have to do is watch Arnold talking and pumping iron. Like, it's really hard to do that, you know. Watch Ed Corney collapse, you know, on film, and that will come to my mind.
Yeah, a couple that come to my mind are Zerchers, especially doing them off the floor, where you have to basically set them on your quads and get your arms under and stand up. That's interesting. Thick bar work, even just going to a 2-inch or 2.5-inch diameter, like changes everything, because now your grip usually becomes a limiter.
Frustrating.
Yeah. Pretty much anything on the evil device they call a Concept 2 rower, especially the 500 meter, 2K, that kind of stuff is super useful, not much fun. And then I would probably add something in like a yoke walk, where you look at it and you're like, oh, that's not that hard. You're only picking up a couple inches. And then you try to walk with it and you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, that can make you sore all over. I did we got a neat idea to do 1,000-pound yoke walk once, and holy shit, like everything hurt, everything from the shoulders down. It was just aching, and it was all in my joints. It wasn't muscular. It wasn't like, oh, that's a good muscular sore. No, every joint just was screaming for like 4 days. So
yeah,
forget. And I've only done them a handful of times. I'm like, this is stupid, but just how much balance is involved with it, because you pick it up at first, and I only did one that was only 450. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is easy, and then I took a step. I was like, what the hell? Movement changes it.
Yeah. Anything that beats up your joints more than your muscle bellies,
yeah,
it does make you wonder, was that worth it? Like maybe it was, but oftentimes it's not.
Yeah. I went to another version I like better is take like an axle bar or just a normal bar, put it in a Zercher position, and then take bands and hang like kettlebells or weights off the end, and then try to walk with it. Yeah. It's not super heavy, so it's not really beating up your joints that much, but man, that thing wants to go every other direction other than forward. So just through your whole core and just your body and every joint, you can feel it in a better way. It doesn't feel like it's trying to crush your joints into dust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you know, I should also include, I know this is just more of an isolation thing, but I call them profanity curls for a reason. But when you grab some, you know, like 40-pound dumbbells, you get on a incline bench, and you just do 4-count negatives. And then when you go to failure, your partner helps you get the dumbbells back up near your shoulders. Remember, you're in a stretched position. Your arms are hanging back down toward the ground. And that, oh man, you're just like, F this full God, you know. And it's just a small muscle group. I get it. You know, it's nothing like a high rep squat. But as far as that, like kind of burning and fighting through and challenge yourself, oh, wow, that kind of sucks.
Even like isolation stuff for high reps, if you're not used to it, it's a weird thing where you get such a local burning, but you're not really that overall fatigued. Mm-hmm. Like if you haven't done it for a while, I just did this again recently, and I'm like, even on a press down, I'm like, it's like, I know I can push a little bit harder, but this doesn't feel good. But it's such a different localized sensation that, I don't know. My brain had a hard time wrapping my head around that was the only reason I was stopping.
Right, yes. Because it doesn't sound very, you know, tough to be like, oh my God, my biceps are burning. But, you know, it'll shut you down.
No, it wasn't like doing heavy squats or something like that where you're breathing hard and you feel like you're cardiovascularly limited. It was just that local torched feeling.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Okay. We are almost at the mid-mark, so I'm going to jam through two things that are related. I have two papers here. These are spanking new things.
Strength and Muscle Sport News.
The first one jumped to my mind because back in 2001, down in Memphis. I was at an American Society of Exercise Physiologists meeting presenting some data about what happens to creatine kinase and other damage markers if you just keep doing the eccentric exercise, right? And so we saw a big fall in CK from about 1 to about 2. It fell a little bit after that, but kind of leveled off. And this new paper, this is a full paper, though, and it's sort of saying the same thing in a lot of ways. This is Lindsay Angus. Muscle strength does not adapt from a second to third bout of eccentric contractions. A systematic review and meta-analysis of the repeated bout effect. So Priscilla Clarkson's lab sometimes would call this the armor plating effect, and we've talked about this before. And I think what the conclusion they make is it's one of those things. It might be a little obvious to Phil, like you just can't endlessly become more resistant to all soreness, because what do? We add more weight, or we do more negatives, or what do we change something? But here it says the greatest muscle strength adaptations to repeat bouts of eccentric contractions occur after the initial injury, right? Micro injury, not like tears, not macro tears, with little to no change in subsequent bouts. However, because of the disparity in different injury models, it's unknown whether 3 or more bouts provide further adaptation, right? Further protection. So like so many studies these days, they're going to, do systematic reviews because of the pandemic and everything, I think, playing part of this. It's easier just to go look at what's already out there and kind of synthesize it. But so they looked over Medline and other databases between May and September 2019. So this is newer stuff. 11 studies with 72 humans, 48 mice, and 11 rabbits were in their inclusion criteria. It's interesting. Negatives. Oh. Rabbits, yeah. You can picture that, huh? The results indicate that a third bout of skeletal muscle eccentric exercise does not, and I'll insert the word, further improve indices of weakness, right, or strength loss, or the rate of strength recovery compared to the second bout. So this sort of reinforces what we've suggested before. And Mike, you remember that book, that Enhancing Recovery book, Kelman and Kenta and a lot of those guys. I'm always pointing at that. But I believe it was there that I saw the suggestion that maybe if you're going to head into a brutal season and you've been really off for a while, do a protective iron plating kind of bout. Get in, your maybe 40 reps of negatives, depends on the movement, of course, but get good and sore, and then head into your training, preseason, if you will, or a ramp up, more or less armor plated. It just makes sense, right? Because then you can focus more on strength, and you don't have to worry about that 15% or so drop in strength because your, Z-lines are smeared and your sarcomeres are wrecked. Again, this is more about the strength itself. What we had presented data on like 20 years ago in Memphis was just on the CK response. But the repeated bout effect, it is an interesting thing. And, Phil, I'm sure that you're not going to see this like continue. People just get more and more and more protected. Like most of the protection, like no longer sore from that happens the first time around probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good indicator for me in like some of the stuff I do. Like if we're changing moves, like generally, let's say I'm changing a main move, I'll do it in 3-week blocks because I always see like week number 1, it's like, hey, let's just get used to this move again. Week 2, let's push it a little harder. Week 3, let's push it hard now, and then let's move on. Anything past that, it kind of gets redundant. And I'd rather just come back to it in 10 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking changes, it's small. I don't do huge changes, but it might be from pause squat to box squat, and whatever. Just little tiny little changes. But
right.
We keep things pretty basic. But
I remember Corey Everson, I think it was. She had big legs. Her quads, her thighs were about the size of her frickin' waist. And I think it was her who used to say, if I feel completely adapted to whatever I'm doing, eccentric work, negatives or otherwise, she would do what you just said. I'll take a couple of months off and revisit it because I enjoy that soreness because that tells me there's remodeling and growth, and I'm guessing probably without even realizing it that few months later, something was different about that same quote unquote same bout.
Yep.
So, anything you know about this, Mike, that you want to share? Or
I mean, I've done that beforehand. I mean, I had to do this crazy exercise setup in Costa Rica a year ago, and I was kiteboarding beforehand and literally had like 10 days to train for it. So I didn't really train for it, but I did enough of the exercises with long eccentrics, like probably around 2 to 3 times during that 10 weeks. And my thought process was similar to what you guys talked about, is if I can just do that enough, it's, I've only got 10 days. I'm not going to increase my performance on it. However, if I can do that, I hopefully won't be as sore, so I can move around and not be like destroyed for 2 weeks after. Yeah. And it went okay. I wasn't too sore after. I did that before some kiteboarding stuff too, just thinking like now in my training I'll add some more, I wouldn't say plyometrics, but just drop jumps and just simple impact stuff too. So maybe get my body a little bit more ready for that, add some longer eccentric type squats in with more of a narrow stance to try to stimulate a little bit more, maybe soft tissue, just recovery in case I have to take a hard impact. Maybe I'm a little bit more prepared to handle that.
Mm-hmm. I think practical tip here, this is great for off-season gains, if you will, right? Obviously, if you're a competitive athlete, why do people taper? Partly because, you don't want to have that 5 or 10 or 15% weakness because of eccentric stuff. When I used to do competitive martial arts, always at practice, my legs were wrecked. And then when I would taper before I went to a tournament, well, things felt a lot different, and so that was kind of gratifying that when you're 15% stronger, you're just better almost at anything, So I would be careful doing this mid-season if you're a team athlete or anything, but it's obviously negatives are great for, growth, satellite cell activation, and all that stuff. I'm going to jam through this last one here. Spanking new. This is again from Carmen Leach. She's just a superstar. I think we're going to try to get her on the show. This is from February of this year. So literally days old. Muscle cells can block inflammation when exercised. Now, this is interesting, right? Because we're talking about all this inflammation that you can clearly see and feel after you do eccentric work. But we all know also that chronically over weeks and months, exercise has an anti-inflammatory systemic effect, right? You're just less inflamed, but it's hard to tease this out. So here we go. Inflammation can be a crucial process. The body needs to heal injuries and prevent infection, but inflammatory processes, of course, have to be carefully regulated. They can cause serious illness and even death, like in the case of sepsis or cytokine storms. And, of course, we hear about cytokine storms a lot with the whole COVID thing. Researchers have now found that human muscle cells are able to prevent the negative impacts of chronic inflammation when they are exercised, as reported in Science Advances. Now, they used a very specific model. This isn't like what we're talking about doing blood draws or strength tests on training humans here, but it says we know that chronic inflammatory diseases induce muscle atrophy. That might get your attention. But we wanted to see if the same thing would happen in some engineered human muscles, basically that they grew in a petri dish. And this was stated by study author Zhaowei Chen. We showed that exercising muscle cells can directly counter this pro-inflammatory signaling independent of the presence of other cell types or tissues. So basically you insult your muscles. They say, hey, what was that, buddy? Right? And just like this armor plating effect, maybe they're ready next time, right, with some anti-inflammatory processes. So they use this engineered muscle platform that mimicked the effects of chronic inflammation. It says, surprisingly, they determined that the detrimental impact of chronic inflammation was almost totally prevented when they basically, quote-unquote, exercised this muscle tissue. It says, when exercising, muscle cells themselves were directly opposing the pro-inflammatory signal induced by interferon gamma, which we did not expect to see happen, said Bursak. there are notions out there that optimal levels and regimes of exercise could fight chronic inflammation. Think sarcopenia. This isn't just, tendinitis, for example. Lots of inflammatory chronic diseases out there, while not overstressing the cells. So again, kind of back to a mechanism here behind the armor plating thing maybe, or the anti-inflammatory effects. It does make me wonder, and this is total, reckless speculation, but would somebody who exercises regularly, are they more resistant to, I don't know, a cytokine storm, for example? I'm sure there's a lot of genetic and other issues at work there, diet and other things, but this is kind of suggestive. It's sort of, again, a mechanism that they try to get real reductionist and look down nitty-gritty. How is it that exercise prevents like a systemic inflammation and the role of muscle plays, right? I don't think I've ever seen anything, Mike, maybe you have, on, what's muscle's contribution to whole body inflammation. I mean, such a huge portion of our body is muscle, right?
I haven't seen too much on that. I mean, my guess is probably similar to what looking at different myokine regulators is. It's probably beneficial, but I can't point to anything directly on that.
Yeah, I haven't seen data about taking this idea and specifically employing exercise just to be anti-inflammatory, like on a whole body level. Maybe even helping downstream with some other organ system or something. Okay, so that's a little bit of stuff about sore muscles, inflamed muscles. Let's go to break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about muscle sports and why they are a calling for some people.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, look at me. Come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now!
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. For this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go. Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody, we're back. It's Phil and Mike and Lonnie, and we're going to talk about muscle and strength sports, why they're a calling for some people. We touched on this before a little bit. I mean, Tom Platz would go on a lot about, almost a calling like a priest. Like when you see something, you're just like, that's me. Like, that's it, And there are some things in life, I think, that are like that. And maybe for some people that's true. So there's a lot of things to consider here, right? Like, what are your natural talents or lack of talents? Is it just about the growth, personal growth that strength sports, they just so obviously emphasize, that you're changing? Or some people might do it for the sense of community or even the aesthetics of it. I was sort of like that Frank Zane. I know it sounds cheesy, but I was about like the sculpting thing and, that kind of stuff. I'm not formally trained in art like Phil, but that's like something that, is important to me. And it is funny how it can get a hold of you and become a calling. Some people just go, they're in that warrior mode and they need the venting of they're just an aggressive personality and it's a positive way to vent. Attack some heavy weights kind of thing. Yeah. What about you personally, Phil? What do you think? And then maybe your people on your team.
God, for me, I don't know. I always like sports, and I've heard other people talk about this. The problem with team sports is I'm a pretty fired up person. When I do something, I want to do it well. And if you end up being on a team where not everybody is at that same focus level, it can be very frustrating. Whereas moving to individual strength sports, I had nobody to blame but me. You just work harder or you don't. You lose, it's your fault. And I liked that aspect of it. And I don't know, there's really something about this, and I've thought about it a lot, I've written about it, this endless battle with gravity. I will never win. And there's something about that I like. No matter what, I can always put another little 2.5 pound plate on the bar, and I just lost. And there's no end. I love this fact that there's literally just no end to just trying more. I can never win. And there's something about that I like, and
that
just seeing how far I can take it.
Right. Worthy adversary, gravity.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. I lost again. Even when I win, I did.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah.
I still only took a portion of what gravity has to give. So, that was a big one for me. I mean,
yeah, that's good. That's real good. I still want to have T-shirts made that, IronRadio, the opponents of gravity. I don't want to say the enemies of gravity because gravity is not your enemy, right? It's your sparring partner, and she's always going to win.
Yep.
At some point. How about you, Mike? I mean, from personal talent to a sense of community or an outlet, or what drew you into strength stuff?
I mean, when I started, probably like most guys, I mean, I was a 6'3", as Phil would say, a eel-shaped rake at 156 pounds. This is actually going into college, so whatever growth spurt I had, nothing happened. So basically just, for more of an aesthetics type thing. And, in high school, in all honesty, I got crushed by the bar on bench press with no weight on it, and that was kind of humiliating. And we had to do the old school presidential fitness test. I'm sure you guys remember that, which in theory is a good idea if you showed people how to train and how to get better at it. But all we did was just administer the test, and the kids that were great were like, oh, that's wonderful. People like me who sucked, it was just I did not want to go to high school those days. The worst one was the pull-up test where he's like, okay, get up there. So I'm hanging from the bar, and he's like, okay, you can start now. I'm like, I am starting. He's like, you haven't moved at all. I'm like, that's all I can do. So probably for those reasons. And then over time, you realize that it's just, I liked kind of the objective nature, and I got much better once I stopped trying to compare myself to everybody else and just realized, okay, so, yep, oh, wow, I did 95 pounds on a bench press now. Oh, cool. I remember the first time I ever did, 135, which was 3 years later. I was like, oh, wow, 135, that's great. I get to put the bigger plates on the bar now, So once I realized it was just more of a competition with myself. And similar to Phil, for me, starting off especially more from an engineering background, it was just, and still is, kind of, it's the ultimate problem to solve, right? There's just so many variables and so many different things. But I could do different things, and I would have an objective nature to measure. Oh, you either made it or you didn't, right? You could measure the outcome relatively easy. You didn't need any fancy equipment or anything else. So to me, that's kind of what what hooked me was with this huge, massive problem to figure out for my physiology, and I can go play around and test it to see what the outcome is.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the multivariate nature of it is you've always got like 50 balls in the air, sort of to like Phil's point about you're never going to completely dominate gravity. You're never going to keep all 50 balls in the air, but can you keep 46 in the air?
Yeah.
You know, and make enough progress to get on stage or on a platform?
And which one of them is the biggest ball? Like, and you'll probably never know. It's like, should I spend more time here or there? And then that changes when you get to a certain point. It's like, oh yeah, nutrition was a limiting factor. Now it's lifting, or it's time, or it's sleep, or stress management, or breathing, or whatever. It's a never-ending list.
Yeah. Well, it's even with strengths and weaknesses. You spend all this time, well, I'm going to concentrate on this. Well, now that's a strength, but you just made something else a weakness by making it a strength.
Yep.
You just... By winning, you just failed at something else.
Right, yeah.
So
you just got that in place, and now there's something else.
Yep.
Isn't that kind of one of the Louis Simmons sayings? I'm sure I'll slaughter it, but there's always a weak link in the chain. It's just figuring out what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Refocusing. I like what you guys are saying about the solo thing. I really like that sort of lone warrior thing. I mean, I played soccer, when I was a kid up through high school, and to your point, Phil, I mean, we had a coach. His role was everybody plays. Well, you can imagine sometimes we even had one learning disabled guy on the team, and our opponents would ruthlessly drive right past him and just destroy us, right? And so the concept was noble. Everybody plays, but then, you get other people on the team. We're talking about, remember, these are kids, and like, come on, dude, what are you doing? And it actually backfired kind of. So I don't think that's necessarily what I had a problem with team sports, really, but I think it was Ernest Hemingway. He said, it's all your own damn fault if you're any good. Yep. I love that personal responsibility, right? If you're any good, you can't point to somebody else. I just like that a lot. Plus, I'm at times painfully introverted, and I am not looking for a sense of community. I remember stories of Lee Labrada. He'd go in the gym with his headphones on, and he'd be in and out of there in like 60 minutes flat. But then I can also appreciate that people who are more extroverted and they feel recharged around others, I can also appreciate that they would like the sense of community, right? I'm not down on that. I'm just down on that for me. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people drawn for that kind of sense of community too. Maybe that's how the forums, the Iron forums will help us do a little bit of it. And then even people like me who are the the lone warrior kind of thing, it's still a way to kind of get involved. But even in the gym, I don't know what it's like if always like this with you, Phil, but for me, I like to have my brother and one or two of my training partners in the gym, like for the occasional spot, but not training with me, kind of. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't want somebody going, come on!
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, and that's, like, I like the environment too, but my people know to leave me alone.
Yeah.
And like today is my heavy squat day and deadlift day, and it's just like, okay, just leave him alone, and when there's a lot of weight on the bar, come over there and make sure he doesn't die.
Right, exactly.
But I'm also I just, the majority of my time, if we look back, was still spent training alone. So like this last month I posted on the forums, or the last 2 weeks I've been in quarantine because I had my mother-in-law was living with me, and she had COVID, but we're fine. None of us got it. And so I've been going and training alone. And I squatted 725 by myself. I squatted 675 by myself. And it was like, I still have that. And I like knowing I can do that. I'm just a little more measured in what I do. They're like, maybe we won't go 775 since I'm alone.
Right. Yeah. And wisdom.
But yeah, I still like having that ability. Like I don't need you. I just need me. And that's what drew me to Iron in the first place. It was like, it's just me. I got to do this. Nobody can help.
Yep.
Yep. So
I think also innate talents and whatnot. Like, I don't know if all of our listeners, if you haven't seen, like, Mike is like Viking stock. I'm surprised, Mike, that you didn't like the physical fitness test and stuff, because you're a big guy. You can hear he's got a deep voice, that kind of stuff. And so I think there are bigger individuals who, if you're not super duper athletic, right? Like I always sucked at like ball tracking, like baseball and stuff. Like that, all that's going to do is tear down my self-esteem. And Phil, you've mentioned before that powerlifters sometimes they're the ones that they might be less, agile or athletic in that way, like, and it gives them a way to dominate.
He talked to Ed Cohn about his past, and he was like, he couldn't dribble a basketball. Like he couldn't do it. Yeah. And you're talking about the greatest powerlifter of all time. But he found out he could stand in one place and sit down and stand up really well.
And really well.
So he just found his thing, and there are some people that are that way, and that's okay. I mean, I don't know. It reminds me of, you go back and like Dungeons and Dragons or something, and each character has its own abilities, and he found his. He's the frickin' dwarf that can just move shit.
Right. That's right. So, all muscle and big hands and yeah.
So, and it's finding that need. It's finding that where you fit. And I talk about it all the time. There's an amazing thing. If you find something you're good at naturally, you're probably going to enjoy that and excel at it.
Yes.
Because you're naturally good at it. Mm-hmm. So it's like find that part of the strength thing too. There's so many different things to do. Find that part you really are kind of good at, and you'll probably excel and push at it harder.
Yeah, I like that. There's another quote. I don't know who said it. Mike, maybe you know, or Phil, you've heard it before, but maybe it was a meme. But it says, that thing that you struggle with and you're just not good at? Yeah, don't do that. Now, that's different. It's a fine line, right? Working on your weakness is one thing. But for me, like me trying to play baseball, man, that's just, I'm going to doom myself to a life of feeling, ashamed to walk into practice, So. Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I've talked about I got hit in the face with balls because I didn't see in 3D. And I just thought some kids are horrible at sports, and that's just the way it goes. And some kids get hit in the face with balls, and that's just bad. And then I realized, if you're that bad, there's probably something neurologically not going on that's firing 100%. But even now when I do assessments and stuff, I'll ask them, did you like playing ball sports? Can you catch a ball? Do you enjoy that at all? And if 99% of the time, if they're like, no, I hated all that stuff. Like, what do you do now? Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, lift weights, right? Something where you can hold on to the other person or they're within very close proximity.
Exactly.
Because if that's true, once you're holding on to something proprioceptively, vision's helpful, but not super helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to hit a fastball, then vision definitely useful there. So it can be almost an eval type thing too, and people will gravitate, hopefully, towards things that they're going to do better at then over time.
Yeah, you would hope. And I think sometimes having a coach like you guys, Mike, with all of your measurements, and Phil with the having the facility and all these people together, sometimes it helps to have more experienced people help you minimize that time of frustration and getting devastated in something that you're just not good at. Phil, you've mentioned before about people who maybe they're just strong as hell, or maybe they're I can't remember the exact story you told once, but
I have one person in particular that just wanted to be a runner, and it was like, you're built like a tree trunk. And so it was just feeding them this, okay, well, we can do that running thing, but you're always going to suck at it, so let's try a little of this too. And just encourage them to go the way that just they're physiologically built for can be a step.
Yeah, just encourage them, because who would want to spend years just beating up their self-esteem instead of having somebody say, listen, you don't see what I see. I know it's hard, you're too close to it, but damn, you're going to be strong. Can you let's just do this over here. We'll just do it a little. We'll do it for supportive of your running.
So,
kind of coax it. I hear what you're saying, Mike, too, about like grabbing onto things, or like kinesthetic things I always enjoyed. Skateboarding, martial arts, stuff like that. But man, try to have me play, well, I'm short, so basketball's going to be out of the picture, but or like I said, baseball or something like that. No way. Just no way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going with what you're good at, because that's going to build your self-esteem, right? You're going to have a sense of success. And I think that's one of the best things about weight training, powerlifting or bodybuilding, because it's almost guaranteed to happen. If you're on any kind of logical progression, I think you're going to be better off so long as you don't hurt yourself, I love that sort of confidence building aspect of it. I mean, I was never the skinny little tiny kid. I was very average size and height and everything else. it wasn't like I was trying to compensate for being bullied or something. It wasn't that at all. But I was fascinated, almost like comic books, like, oh my God, you can get a little taste of that superhero, like because you start getting bigger and stronger and buffer, and that's really good for your confidence, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Oh, no. Yeah, and I think especially coaches of younger youth athletics, what I would love to see is them look and say, okay, this person is so bad, there's probably something neurologically going on. So you need to go visit this person or this specialist. Or, maybe everything's working well, you're just not as good at that. So let's have you go try this for a period of time. Just try to negotiate and move people to different things that they're good at. I think especially at a younger age, I think would be super beneficial instead of trying to constantly pound a square peg into a round hole. And there's some skills that I think all kids should go through, gymnastics, rolling, tumbling, just developmental stuff. Yeah, absolutely. But, after that stage, especially getting in towards high school, I think, moving people into directions to at least try things they might be good at. I think there's a huge amount of value in that instead of trying to force everyone. We had a coach who was a cross-country coach. So you can imagine we did cross-country running for probably 3/4 of the year because he loved it. But he never told us how to run. It was just, all right, you guys go run. I'm like, there's no skill development either. Yeah. It's like, come on.
Go run and don't stop. Okay,
yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, that's it? Huh, this sucks.
Boy.
Okay, well, we're just about out of time. I'm actually convalescing a little this weekend. I got my second Moderna shot, and I've got like mild flu-like symptoms here. So it's funny. I'm slamming coffee. Just I got to function. I got to operate anyway, but I'm still not having a ball right now. So I
had a client who getting his second round on the 15th. So we already backed off his training for that week ahead of time.
Yeah. No, that's just it. Because I tend to have an allergic response to things, and I'm thinking I'm not going to walk around with angioedema, lips the size of, I don't know, donuts or something, because I induced allergy with combining it with exercise. Like, I'm actually a little concerned, and maybe that's irrational, but exercise-induced allergy is a thing. But anyway, so all right, cool stuff. Hopefully, you know what? Maybe somebody on the forums can chime in if they're an extrovert and they're like, you guys are all sort of like the solo dudes. I love the community. I feed off the team. Maybe we can even have them on as a guest.
Yeah. Real quick, I know that some people I've lifted with, especially in Costa Rica and other places, like that's their thing. Like getting people together and just all lifting together, that's what drives them. And for me, even with traveling and everything, it's taken me probably almost 2 decades to drop me into that environment and be like, oh, this is okay. Where for years I just hated it. It's like, oh no, can't we just lift at another time? So I would like go in the morning or go in the afternoon when no one was there, and I'm it's so much better.
I love empty gyms. I love empty gyms.
Yeah.
Okay, cool stuff. All right, everybody.
See you.
See you next week.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.